It's one of the best-selling SUVs in Australia, but after 5 years on the road with no major updates, is the Mazda CX-30 still up to scratch? Let's find out. You're tuned to Four Wheels in the Seat. My name's Alex Dalrymple. This is my channel where I review new cars every week for people who might need to buy a new car and don't know which way to turn. I can help you out with a simple, straightforward review. Don't miss an episode though. Hit the subscribe button down below, the notification bell, and if you enjoy the video, give me a like. Mazda are in the midst of a reinvention with their larger SUVs, the CX-60 and CX-90, starting to nudge into premium territory, and that could be arguably leaving smaller cars like the CX-30 feeling just a little bit left behind. But it still looks really, really good. But is it worth the money? Well, let's have a look around the front of the car here. So we've got some nice chrome accents here on the front light clusters and halogen daytime running lights. Surely LEDs don't cost that much to insert. They're yellow and it just doesn't look right at all. The main headlights are LEDs and they look pretty nice. Another thing I don't love are the textured plastic wheel arches here. Now they look okay in this car with this particular paint job that's sort of, you know, a greeny browny kind of color. But if you have a white or a blue car, it just doesn't work at all. I do like the alloys though. They're 18 inches, black, shiny, nice, simple design. We've got a sunroof up on top. Again, more of this black plastic down here on the bottom. I know that it's for protection, but I don't know. I just don't like the look of it. Overall shape, it does look a little bit like a Mazda 3 hatchback. And you know, that's actually kind of true because the two cars do sit on the same platform, but the design language here I think actually works a bit better than it does on the Mazda 3. Moving around the back here, classic Mazda design, not mistaking this for anything else. We've got two exhausts down the bottom there that are quite spread apart, and the classic taillight design here, which I really like. Underneath the tailgate, a not terribly huge space. The official stats say that this is only 317 litres, but I don't know, to me it does look just a little bit bigger. Under the floor, we've got a Space Saver spare tyre under the bonnet, and this particular car is a second from top spec GTSP, so it gets a larger engine than the entry-level model. So here we've got a 2.5 litre four-cylinder petrol engine that outputs 139 kilowatts and 252 newton meters of torque. It's a Skyactiv G engine and very fuel efficient, clocking in at just 6.6 litres per 100 kilometres on a combined cycle. The interior of the CX-30 is clean and minimalist and maybe not feeling quite as premium as some of Mazda's newer cars, but that's not to say that there's really anything wrong with it because the materials here are fantastic. We've got lots of stitching across the top of the dashboard here. The materials feel really nice and solid with a good amount of soft touch and a bit of give in those. One detail I really do like is the way that this angle here kind of slopes down backwards, and it's very reminiscent of cars from the 1970s. I just sort of think of, you know, like a 1970s Mustang when I see that kind of angle in a car. In the middle, we've got a 10.25 inch center console screen, which is a couple of inches bigger than the entry-level model, and it's got the latest Mazda software on it, which is pretty good. So this screen is set back just an uncomfortable distance away from the driver, so it's not that easy to use while you're driving. You're supposed to use it with the jog wheel, except when you go into Apple CarPlay mode, and then it suddenly comes to life as a touch screen. But even then, it's a little bit awkward to use. Climate controls, pretty standard underneath that, easy to use. It's nice that they've kept those separate from the center console screen. It's becoming an increasingly rare thing in cars these days. Wireless phone charging, cup holders, lower console. We've got the jog wheel, as I mentioned before, some drive mode controls. The only drive mode in this car is Sport. You either have Sport or Normal. That's pretty much it. Underneath the slidey lid bin here, one change from the previous CX-30 I reviewed a couple of years ago is that now we have USB-C ports here rather than USB-A. Good size center console bin. This lid feels nice and soft, nice to rest your elbow on that. Head-up display is nice and bright and passes the polarized sunglasses test. Steering wheel straight out of the Mazda parts bin. This is a wheel that you'll find in a lot of Mazdas. It's got a lot of buttons and a lot of controls on it, but they're all well labeled. It's not hard to figure out what does what. The digital instrument cluster, well, it's only really half a digital instrument cluster. The dials on the outside are analog. And some of the newer Mazdas are getting full digital screens. That's yet to find its way into the CX-30. Paddle shifters on the back of the wheel as well. The seats are leather. They are actually really quite comfortable. The driver gets full electric adjustment with lumbar support. Everything's manual for the front passenger. I really like this red leather. The seats are heated as well. And the seating position, one thing Mazda do really, really well is give you a sporty feeling seating position in the cabin. So you actually can sit quite low, but you've still got fantastic visibility out the front. I've got loads of headroom and my knees aren't really getting all that close to the steering wheel or anything like that. Great view through the rear vision mirrors. All up, a very pleasant cabin to sit in. Look, this is a small SUV, so a 190 centimetre tall adult was never really going to work behind my own seating position. But having said that though, the seats themselves, again, more of that nice leather, they actually feel quite comfortable, although my knees are hard into the seat in front of me. A couple of air vents here. Headroom is actually all right because there is actually a hump here for the sunroof where it retracts, but it sort of just stops in time for me to have enough headroom. We've got an armrest with cup holders. So kids will be okay back here. For adults, short trips only. Well, certainly the most noticeable difference between the entry-level model and this GT SP is more power. The larger 2.5 litre engine really does have a lot more go. The smaller 2 litre unit, I would definitely try to avoid because it just is not really living up to Mazda's moniker of zoom zoom, whereas this one does. Is it a turn back car? A car so good looking that you have to turn back and look at it after you've parked it? It's not ugly, it's an attractive car, but it is hardly distinctive. I mean, Mazda's design language is kind of more or less the same across the board. Kodo design has infiltrated every single Mazda model just about, and there is a certain sameness. Now that's not a bad thing, it's just doesn't really make for very unique looking cars. So yeah, maybe not a turn-back car. Slightly confusingly on the instrument cluster, there are actually 2 fuel dials. One is your traditional full to empty analog dial, pretty easy to understand, but next to that is another digital dial that again kind of more or less shows full to empty, that it actually shows the number of kilometers of range you have left. But the way that it's done, it still looks like a full to empty dial, and the 2 dials don't actually quite match up. The amount of liquid in the tank looks like I can go further than it can the actual number of kilometers displayed. So which one do you trust? The suspension is actually surprisingly firm, and I noticed that the other day when I went over a speed hump. There was an almighty thud, and that wasn't the car bottoming out because this actually rides up sort of reasonably high and there's plenty of ground clearance. I think it was actually the suspension hitting the top of the wheel arch, and yeah, it just really kind of threw me off a little bit. And there is sort of a slightly noticeable difference between the suspension in this car and, say, the suspension tune that you get in a Hyundai or Kia, which are specifically tuned for Australia. Whether Mazda do that or not, I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look that up. Maybe you can tell me in the comments below. But it does seem that the ride is just a little harsher than it perhaps should be. One small thing I do like is the sound of the indicators. It's a very satisfying sort of click that I don't know how to describe, but you'd expect to hear it in a BMW or an Audi, and it has just the effect of making everything feel a bit more premium, and also it kind of pulsates on rather than just turning on. It kind of comes on brightly and then fades out. It's little things like that that really do lift the cabin a bit. And unlike some other cars I've been driving lately from other car makers, there have been really no issues with connecting wireless Apple CarPlay to this system. One thing I have noticed, and this isn't a problem in particular to any car, it seems to happen to all of them, but When I drive into a car park, often CarPlay will stop working or it'll drop in and out constantly, and I have no idea why. And like I said, it will happen with just about every car. If anyone knows why that happens, can you let me know? Because it's one of those things that really frustrates the hell out of me. So while I think this car is really good and sort of really doesn't want for much, I mean, it's got pretty much everything you need for a urban SUV around town, I do think it's maybe several $1,000s too expensive. I think 40K would be a good amount to pay for a car with this level of equipment and comfort. 46 just seems a little excessive. The air conditioning is really good. I went for a run this morning and it's a reasonably warm day. I was boiling hot afterwards, got into the car, cooled down in no time at all. Would have been even better if the seats were ventilated, but you know, you can't have it all. The Mazda CX-30 still looks really good even 5 years after it first hit the road. It probably could do with a bit of a facelift and a freshen up, but Mazda generally don't do that. They'll change one or two small things, but leave the rest of the car largely unchanged. At almost $46,000 for how you see it here, I think it's a little bit too expensive. But what do you think? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you next week.